Do you guys ever look at all of the unread books in your apartment, wherever they are, in your bookshelves, living room, whatever, and think to yourself, why the fuck did I buy all of these books that I know I'm never going to read?
What do you do with the books you haven't read?
Well, for me, they just get damaged by the sun, so all of their spines are bleached out, but the rest of the books look the same. So,
You put your books outside?
No, it's just the sun shines right on them in my office.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So the sun can shine into houses, right? I forgot about that.
So that would make your office a place where the sun does shine.
Hey, put those books where the sun shines.
Somewhere in the middle of Arizona, you painted a desert and called it my home. You made an enemy out of blue.
Welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that does not give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Chris Jensen. I'm a contributing writer at SIVO Weekly, and I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Evan Crean. I am editor for The Independent, co-chair of BOFCA, and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
And my name is Dave Riedel, and you know what I write for. I don't remember.
We don't
so.
actually, because you never actually say.
I know. Well, according to last week, when I wasn't in
Right.
the same room with you guys, I think what you said was, this is Dave Riedel, and I think I write for Salt Lake City and Orlando Weekly and some other places. I don't know if that's the impersonation, if I got it quite right.
You don't know if you got your impersonation of us impersonating you quite right.
No, that's it. It's kind of like that movie Multiplicity. When you make a copy of a copy, you're not sure if it's
Right.
going to be smart or dumb.
And that's why
So-
mine was like, my name's Dave Riedel.
Yeah.
Anyway, on this show, we've got a pretty lean show for you this week, except for one
Well,
of them
which is
a lot of
surprising because
movie.
one of the movies is nearly 3 hours long.
Yeah. We've got a Netflix Psycho Stalker,
Yeah.
Secret Obsession.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the name of the tie-in Calvin Klein scent. And then
Yes.
we've also got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Yes.
the Quentin Tarantino movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't appreciate the ellipsis in the title. I do have to say that.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
In Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little cheeky.
It's kind of like Metallica, hardwired to self-destruct.
Yeah. Or with a piece sells, but who's buying punctuation for the Megadeth album. Yeah. That's a little wacky.
You can tell that they started as the same band and then splintered.
Yeah, right. Also, be sure to check out our Patreon segment where we have the results of our latest poll. If you contribute to our Patreon, there are exclusive polls you can vote on. And this month's poll, was choose which host you want to make the others watch a bad movie, a measurably bad movie that they personally love. I chose Winter's Tale, which we had talked about on the show before, but now I'm really glad that my co-hosts have watched it. But one of those co-hosts is glad they watched it too. The other is not. Tune into the Patreon page to find out.
Yeah.
And we got lots of other stuff for you.
Or
there
you
too.
can look on one of our Twitter pages and you'll see something. You'll see a little hint.
Yeah, if you want a spoiler to the Spoiler Piece Patreon, you can look at our Twitter pages to know
Yeah.
what opinion you're going to find. So to kick things off, Evan, Secret Obsession.
Yes. Well, I think it's pretty well documented at this point that Shauna and I like to watch Psycho Stalker movies since it's one of her favorite genres of film. So when Netflix said, hey, we have a new Psycho Stalker movie, we said, all right, Netflix, we'll watch it.
Mr. Netflix came with his hat and briefcase to the door. Said, hey,
Yeah.
you two, I hear you like Psycho Stalker movies.
It started to autoplay the trailer, and we said, well, of course we have to see it. And I think it comes as no surprise that this movie is terrible. It's so bad. It's so bad. Where to begin?
Bad, huh?
The whole thing. Well, to give you an idea, it's a 4.3 out of 10 on IMDb. And we know IMDb is very generous in its rating system.
It really is. Would you like to know what it gave Winter's Tale?
Oh, I'd love to know.
It's about a 6.5.
In what world? But yeah.
So Evan just gave away who liked it and who didn't, by the way.
Oops.
Spoiler.
So yeah, it's bad. It's just it treats everything with this melodramatic tone that makes it feel very soap opera-y, and it's the most obvious thing the entire time. So the movie opens with Jennifer, who's the main character. She's running from an assailant, and she's at like a rest stop trying to hide in the toilets, and then she runs outside, and it's pouring rain, and she's trying to start her car, and her car's hooked up to a winch tied to the car of the guy who's chasing her. And then she...
Wow, this guy really thought of everything.
Oh, yeah, totally. And then she runs away, and bam! She gets hit by a car. And so other people witness this, and she goes to the hospital, and guess what? She's got amnesia. So she doesn't remember what happened to her. So this bespectacled guy shows up at the hospital saying, I'm her husband.
Bespectacled.
Yep.
That's your first warning sign. Not including you, Evan.
Why, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that vote of confidence. So he shows up and says, I'm her husband. And it's like, Doc, is she gonna remember me? He's like, I don't know. What can I tell you about amnesia? Probably not. Maybe not. Who knows? So
Jackie Mason plays this doctor.
Yes.
I don't know. She's got amnesia.
The only known person in this movie is Dennis Haysbert, who plays the cop investigating this initially hit and run, and then what turns out to be missing person / craziness. So
does he play it as if he's Pedro Serrano from Major League?
Oh, I wish. No, he plays it as a tortured guy who lost his daughter, and you don't know whether she was missing or dead. You assume missing, and he didn't solve the case, but he buys her birthday presents every year and then wraps them and then puts them on a shelf in his apartment.
I'm going to already say too much plot.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. They don't address any of that. They don't do anything else with that. And then like at the end of the movie, he's like packing up and getting rid of that stuff and moving out of his apartment. He's like, I'm going to move to Arizona and date some divorcees and play golf for the rest of my days. And you're just like, what? We're just going to forget.
Does he really say that?
Yeah, he does. He's like, okay, so we're just going to fucking forget about that. Anyway, back to the hospital. This guy shows up, says, I'm your husband. She's like, I don't remember you. But he produces all of this evidence. Like, he's got photo albums of them together. And, he's with her every day and taking care of her as she's getting better. And one of the parts that's kind of ridiculous is she's playing a memory game.
One of the parts?
Yes. She's playing a memory game where she's flipping over cards and then he's helping her. Like, did he just mansplain a memory game to her? He was like, no, go to this one over here. It's like, you're not supposed to be helping her with a memory game. She needs that to get better. He's just upset. He's obsessed with her. He's there all the time. And
doesn't sound like a secret.
Yeah, so it's not a secret. He's not actually her husband. He's a guy who's, put together a very elaborate thing to trick everyone into thinking he's her husband. And as soon as he takes her home from the hospital, that's when he starts getting really possessive. And like, he gives her a phone and there's no reception at their house. And he's like, oh, we just get bad reception here. And he, she's like in her room all the time and he doesn't want her walking around. And he's like, oh, your parents are dead. And, you quit your job so that we can start a family. He has all these excuses as to why she doesn't need to have contact with anybody else. And obviously she starts to get suspicious. She starts digging around the house and starting to realize that things are not what they seem. And then eventually, she sneaks out, basically. She realizes that he's holding her captive and he's not her husband. And she tries to sneak out, and then he catches her out of the house and knocks her unconscious and ties her to a bed. All the meanwhile, Dennis Haysbert is doing the groundwork and figuring out what's going on with this. The guy gave the hospital a bogus number and a bogus address as to where they were. He doesn't bring her in to help with any of the questioning of the hit and run. So, he gets suspicious and he's investigating on the side and eventually figures out the whole situation was that this guy was a coworker of hers and her and the guy that she was actually married to were together, and they all worked together, and he was secretly jealous of them the entire time. And so he waited, and then he killed the husband, and then he was chasing her, and that's when she got hit. And so this whole
That's literally all in the trailer.
Yeah, totally. There's nothing surprising about this movie at all.
The trailer really shows who he really is.
Yes. It shows him like digging up their backyard, and she's
Yeah.
like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Nothing, just burying a body." I mean, he doesn't say that.
No, he doesn't. But there's a couple of murders that go completely unaddressed, which is weird. So there's this guy in the beginning with dark hair and a leather jacket, and they show him, and he seems ominous, like maybe he's the villain. Like he shows up at the hospital to bring some flowers, and like he calls the cops, or he's talking to the cops, and he's like, I think I saw a white pickup truck towing a car away from the scene or something. And I don't remember. I think the fake husband, sees this guy at the hospital with the flowers and then follows him home and then murders him at his house. And then they don't show it, but they show him digging in the garden, which I guess is to assume he took that guy's body and buried it in his own backyard. So they just like completely, they never address that. They never address why this guy even cares about this. The dark-haired guy with the leather jacket even cares about this situation in the first place, like why he wants to be involved. Because he says something like, "Oh, I'm a concerned party." And you're like, well, why? You never know, because he gets murdered. And then like Dennis Haysbert realizes what's going on. So instead of, calling for backup to go confront this guy, he just goes there by himself and gets whacked over the head and stuffed in a freezer. So then he has to break out of the freezer to help, rescue, what's her name? I've already forgot her name. Jennifer. Yeah. So you also find out that this guy went and murdered her parents at some point.
Oh my God.
So that's just a thing. He murdered her parents. He murdered her husband, who is like in the trunk of the car. Where you find out like his body. He hasn't even buried his body yet. Again, no idea why. There's just things that just don't make any sense about this movie.
Was his plan like this will give her amnesia? Like,
no, I don't think his plan was to give her amnesia. I think it was just a happy
ready.
accident. And so when she had amnesia, then he could just show up and assume the role of her husband.
So these photos of them together, they weren't doctored. They were real photos.
They were doctored photos. So they were photos that she was in with her actual husband that he like photoshopped his face on.
Okay.
Because at one point you see her look at the wedding photograph and you see that the skin on the neck is darker than his skin on his head. So she's like, "Oh, wait a minute. That seems funny."
Could have stood to be a little more obsessive there, buddy.
Yeah, I know. Attention to detail. He doesn't have it.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
God.
that's why he ends up dead at the end.
By the way, though, is the guy who plays the main guy? Is the actor's name Mike Vogel?
Yes.
Because he is in She's Out of My League. He's not unknown.
Oh, okay. Well,
And he's also in like one of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remakes or prequels or whatever.
mm-hmm.
It looked like there was going to be a time when he was going to be hot guy, except he's short, so I guess not.
Yeah, I had never seen him before. I mean, also it's kind of funny because the guy who was her actual husband seems like the biggest tool. Like you see him and you're like, that guy seems like a tool. Like he seems like probably a shitty husband. Like also like a dick, but obviously less of a dick than this other guy, this murdering guy.
So how does he die?
Boy.
How does the guy die?
So he chases Jennifer into the woods. Dennis Haysbert busts out of the freezer, and then she throws a rock at him and hits him with like a branch. Dennis Haysbert comes. He had stolen Dennis Haysbert's gun, so they get into, the age-old scuffle on the ground trying to get the gun. She picks up the gun, shoots him once. Then he's like he's coming at her, and then she shoots him another time, and then he's like down for the count.
I think deaths of characters like this maybe need to be more of their own making instead of just, the gun slipped. Oh, she's got the gun now.
Right, yeah.
So what the fuck was the Dennis Quaid movie that I told you guys to check out?
The Intruder.
The Intruder.
Yeah.
Where that's his gun, and like it's his series of traps led to his undoing. You know what I mean?
Right. His overconfidence.
No, let her kill him. Like kill him 20 times over.
Yeah.
Just like instead of just the gun slipping and she has it now.
Yeah, it should have been way more interesting than that. I mean,
You're describing every Netflix movie though, Evan.
Right.
It should have been way more interesting than that.
Right. There's just some other notes. This movie is very into feet. She has a thing where she injures her foot. She injures her foot, I think in the accident or in running to before she gets hit by the car. So she's in a wheelchair for the good part of it, and then being at home, and then she has like a cane that she's supposed to be using. And so there's like all this stuff where she's like hobbling around on one foot basically. And then there's a couple of like twisted scenes where he's like grabbing her foot that's like clearly fucked up and like twisting it and gonna like, I don't know, break her ankle or something. It's just a weird emphasis on feet.
Well, that we're not ready to segue into the next movie yet.
Yes, I'm sure that will be part of it as Tarantino.
Not as much as you'd expect, but you notice it.
Yeah.
Secret
Obsession.
Yes.
Is there anybody who should watch this? Is there any quality that somebody might like in a movie, even if it's shitty enjoyment?
I don't think so.
Because I know you guys like this genre.
It's that bad.
Yeah, it's just so rote. Like everything about it is just so uninteresting. And I have to add this just because I decided to look up the guy who wrote it, Peter Sullivan. His IMDb, he's very prolific and in weird ways. So he makes a lot of these like
he wrote a movie called Feet, the documentary.
No, he's written a lot of these kind of movies which have the title wrong in them, like The Wrong Mommy, The Wrong Boy Next Door, The Wrong Stepmother, The Wrong Roommate. He's also he has written, produced, whatever, so many Christmas movies, multiple Christmas movies in a year. In 2014, he made 4 different Christmas movies.
How many Christmases were there in 2014?
I was just scrolling through his IMDb in shock, in disbelief at how prolific he is. I mean, like, are all of them this shitty? Is he just trafficking like the shittiest movies?
Yeah, he's the David E. Kelly of shitty movies. Instead of writing 5 TV shows a season, he makes 4 Christmas movies a year, and they're all bad.
Yeah, like legit, like the last several years, at least 3 to 4 Christmas movies every year.
And don't forget The Dog Who Saved Easter. I just looked that one up.
Yeah, and the one about A Tale of Two Corys, about young Corey Haim and Corey Feldman.
Oh my God.
So it sounds like he has found a way to sell screenplays, and good on you for working as much as you do. I do like once you're in that level of production, I think these are kinds of movies that they make and they hire people who are proven to be able to churn them out. And I think low cost of entry, low level of investment from the person who might see it. Mm-hmm. Things like Psycho Stalker movies, things like Christmas movies. People are like, oh, I love Christmas movies. Oh, I love Psycho Stalker movies. I'll check those out.
Right.
And so they go to this, they draw from the same well, someone who can have the same kind of turnaround. That's my guess.
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some financial reason that it makes sense to make 4 Christmas movies in a year.
Yeah, there's no like, hey, I've got a great idea for a story. It's like we're making 4 of these. So let's see them.
I got a great idea for 4 Christmas movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, this movie's terrible. It's bad, not worth seeing, but I don't know. I couldn't believe the output of the guy who made it.
Cool.
It's a niche, right? You got it. Like, I just wrote a whole, like last Christmas, I wrote an article about Christmas movies, and I thought I was going to have trouble finding enough Christmas movies. Oh, no. There were too many to watch in the 2 weeks I had to write the story. Mm-hmm. So you got to pick and choose your shitty ones, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So there we go. I'm okay with wrapping this up now. Unless you got more to say.
I'm done.
So Dave and I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the new Quentin Tarantino, the 9th film of Quentin Tarantino. Which means there's one more to go. What will it be? Who knows?
Star Trek. He's
That's
making a Star Trek movie.
Maybe. He says if you make it, it'll be his 10th. The last I saw. I'll believe it when I see it. Once it goes into production, once there's stills or something.
How can Tarantino retire? He loves letting people know how much he knows about movies too much.
Well, he won't direct any more movies. I think he's going to do a Soderbergh, maybe without the return. I think he might go into TV. He's been courting Netflix a lot. Or producing, writing, writing books. Maybe I'd be interested to read like a Tarantino book. I think he's very well read in that old style of criticism from the 60s and 70s. I would love to see that.
Yeah, and it would serve him well to have an editor.
Yeah. So this movie, we saw it this afternoon, Dave and I did, and it's been growing on me ever since. And Dave, I'm curious about you. It's been a few hours since I've seen you. What's the digestion process been like for you?
I like it more now than I did at 4:45 p.m.
To cut to the chase, here's the thing. I want people to know that it doesn't end in like a reenactment of the Manson murders. Because I think that's the speculation. You think of a big Tarantino, shootout. Everybody dies. It's full of blood. It's trashy people. Think of like the last action scene of *Inglourious Basterds*, of Django, of *Reservoir Dogs*. Like this is something that he does a lot. And full of blood and full of death. Everybody dies except for the couple of people who walk out. And that's not what this is. This is actually kind of the opposite. And it uses your expectation that you might think he'd do this not against you, but as a misdirection.
But it also kind of does it.
It also kind of does it. It rewrites history.
Yeah.
So it lessens the movie to boil it all down to the ending, but I do think it's worth mentioning what the ending is first. What do you think, Dave?
I agree.
To sort of get it out of the way so you can get into the tone of the movie.
Because the thing about the end of the movie is, this sounds like a strange thing to say, the end of the movie's not about the end of the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's about, it's just this thing that happens because it's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which the more I think about the title, the more I think that everything can kind of fall neatly under this umbrella, and you can sort of explain it away that way, which is part of the reason I'm coming around to it more and more each time I think of it.
Yeah. And it turns what we now know as the Manson murders, it turns them into like, what if it happened in a slightly different way? It would be this footnote in history to this one person who was a TV star. And it would not have gained any recognition. It just would have been a weirdo 60s cult that either dissipated or went into obscurity. It turns the obsession with Manson and stuff on its head.
Yeah. So what happens, Evan, is that instead of going to kill Sharon Tate and all of the people who were at her home the night she was murdered, August 9th, 1969, they go to Leonardo DiCaprio's house to murder presumably him, and
because he gave them shit. He's neighbors with Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski.
Right.
And so like the car pulls up and it's noisy, it's annoying, it's a private road.
Call it a beater is a compliment.
Yeah. So he comes out and yells at him and he's like, get the fuck off this street. They've got weapons in the car, and he just doesn't relent until they start backing up. And they're like, hey, I recognize the guy from TV from 10 years ago. And then they say Sadie, right? Who they called her Sexy Sadie in the circus that was the coverage. She's like, you know what? They taught us how to kill by watching TV. Let's cut off their cocks and feed them to them. Says it that way. And so then they break into his house instead. Brad Pitt, who is a vet who has killed before, as you find out.
Well, maybe he's killed before.
I think it's a definite. But
you think so?
I think it's a definite. I think it's there's a lot of mythologies that they insert, especially Brad Pitt into, as a way of getting around it. But so he and his dog kill the intruders.
They kill two of them.
And then Leo has a leftover flamethrower from a movie that he worked on, and he
kills the third one.
Kills the third one, and then he goes over to the house. Like when the police are driving away, the ambulance is driving away. Brad Pitt's in the ambulance. He's going to survive. And one of the guys who was one of the people who was killed waves. Who's Emil Hirsch? Waves and says like, "Hey man, come over here. Like, what the hell happened? Oh shit, I know you. In fact, like I always tease Sharon Tate that she's your neighbor, that this famous cowboy guy." And meanwhile, he's had this like, oh my God, those are my neighbors. They're on top of the world right now, but I'm not in their stratosphere. So then Sharon Tate calls on the call box and says like, "Hey, you want to come in for a drink, meet my friends? Like, I'm glad you're okay." Movie ends with him going into their house, and then they
to have a drink.
To have a drink, and so the Manson murderers died, and all's well.
Yeah,
That's the end of the movie.
Huh.
And I think, I'm sure I've talked before, if not on the show, then in your ears, how much the ending of Inglourious Bastards just makes me furious. The same way that Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter makes me furious. And what I mean is, the whole idea behind Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is that, or Zombie Hunter, is vampires or zombies?
Vampires.
I don't remember. Vampires. Thank you. The whole idea that vampires are behind slavery because of something, it's just like, can we not take truly an American tragedy and turn it into fucking pop culture, which you clearly have no respect for, by the way. Otherwise, you wouldn't make slavery a vampire trope. And that's how I felt about Inglourious Bastards, except instead of vampires, Nazis. It's just like, oh, yay, we get to kill Hitler. It's not really funny. It's not really cool to say, oh, you know what? We're going to prevent the Holocaust because, we murdered Hitler in 1942 or whatever. But in this, kind of like letting Sharon Tate live, I kind of like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you spend a lot of time with Sharon Tate during the movie. And you sort of get the who's Margot Robbie. You get the you get the sense that it's like building up to how tragic her murder was, that she was just getting a start on life, that and we know that she was pregnant when it happened, and that there's a scene where she goes and she watches her own movie and she's like just excited that people are watching it, and at a certain point people cheer. She's proud of the work she put into it, and so we get to know. She doesn't do a lot. I think that's, again, playing with the expectation of how the movie's going to end. Like, just the suggestion that she is Sharon Tate and it takes place in 1969 is already setting the stage for something. She's not the only real person in the movie. There's also Bruce Lee. As I said, there's Roman Polanski, who barely says a word, which I'm glad for. We don't need to... Yeah. He was part of that chapter of history, but he didn't really do... He's not worth exploring. Not for this movie. There's also Steve McQueen. There's Michelle Phillips. Each of them for really one scene. And so, they have Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. So the plot is that Leonardo DiCaprio, he's a TV star. Brad Pitt is his stunt double, but the stunt double is kind of turned into assistant. When Leonardo DiCaprio, he's an alcoholic. When he gets his license revoked, Brad Pitt is chauffeuring him, and then when he's on the set, Brad Pitt goes back and fixes stuff at his house, hangs out there, house sits for him, etc. And they've just been doing that for a while. Thing is, there's a meeting early on where he's meeting with Al Pacino. Al Pacino is pitching him the idea of doing spaghetti westerns, going to Italy, not being the guy who shows up on TV and is beat up by the hero. Because he's working, but he's going to create the impression in audiences' minds that that's all he is. He's the guy that gets beat up by the hero. He's not a standout in any way. So he's starting to feel the downward slope of his career. He's feeling like he's not going up. He's either treading water or going down. Where's the best way to go with the plot here is that he gets a job, that he starts to screw up because he was drinking that before.
Okay.
Then he nails it the next day. He says, "Do not drink. That's your last one." And it's actually a terrific scene in his trailer when he's like yelling at himself. Leo is fucking amazing in this role. It's worth mentioning. And Brad Pitt's amazing in his role too. And
I just want to break in and say I think this is the best Brad Pitt has ever been. And I'll be the first to criticize Brad Pitt, believe me. Mm-hmm. So he's great. He's so great.
Yeah. They're both natural in ways they haven't been before. Now, obviously, they're movie stars who belong on the screen.
Yeah.
But they're the kind of movie stars that announce themselves as movie stars when they arrive on the screen, that works in a lot of movies. In this one, they are so natural in their roles. They're going to end up on one of my lists for sure. One of them on one of the lists. So he gets this job. While he's at it, Brad Pitt has been sort of eyeing this hippie girl who's been around town. They've made eyes. He's refused a hitch once because he's going the other direction. This third time he picks her up. She says, "Hey, why don't you drive me here?" And it's this old. It's where the Manson family actually lived. It was this old like set where they would shoot cowboy movies. They go there, and so there's these 3 parallel stories where Leo is shooting this like redemption. He's shooting this character, but the character who is the actor is seeing this as his artistic and professional redemption. That's happening. That's on a Western show. Mm-hmm. Brad Pitt's character is reenacting this real Western scenario where the guy who owns the ranch is maybe dead, maybe in the house. He doesn't know because all these guys are fucking weird and they're giving him non-answers. And it's this suspenseful thing where he goes back to see, is this guy who I used to work with alive or dead? And he is back there. He's Bruce Dern. And
he was really going blind in real life.
Yeah.
As he is in the movie.
And then while that's happening is, so George Spahn. It spawns something.
Spawn's cattle ranch or something yeah.
like that. And while that's happening, Margot Robbie, Sharon Tate, is watching herself. She's like walking past the theater. She sees her name on a marquee. She sees her name on a poster. She sees stills from the movie. She goes over and she says like, "Hey, so I'm in this movie." And people like don't recognize her. They know that Sharon Tate, they know the name Sharon Tate, and they know that Sharon Tate was in Valley of the Dolls, but like looking at her they don't recognize her. So anyway, she goes into the movie and she like remembers shooting some scenes. She remembers shooting the action scenes, training with Bruce Lee. People cheer when she wins a fight. People laugh at her comedic dialogue, and she's doing great, and she's really enjoying it. And she walks out like carefree, like, yes, I'm really living this. This is really happening. And 6 months later is the scenario we just described.
Okay.
So really, that's it. There's stuff, obviously, in between.
Right.
There's details. But those are the 3 moments of the movie.
Yeah.
What do you think?
3 long moments.
Yeah, and perfectly long, I think.
Yeah. It's, as I was saying to Chris, we were talking after the movie, I said one of the things, of course, that really drives me insane about Tarantino movies is the way he's in love with his own dialogue, and it kind of ruins a bunch of scenes in Inglourious Bastards for me, and it ruins everything in Death Proof. And in this, there's none of the big speechifying. There's none of it. It's actually kind of strange. There's actually lots of moments of almost, I wouldn't say Michael Mann silence, because I don't think that Quentin Tarantino could ever do that. But there are lots of times when the characters don't speak at all. They're just like driving, or they're, going somewhere, or they're looking pensive. And it all really works effectively. And this is something Chris pointed out to me, which I didn't think about. Almost the entire movie is linear. There's no like Tarantino flashbacks except for one. And it's like a legit flashback. Yeah. It's really funny when you learn that it is a flashback.
Yeah, it's not presented as a flashback, but it cuts to the moment that happened right before it, and you realize it was Brad Pitt remembering this. And the situation was that he was remembering, like he was thinking about how Leo's like, you can't come on set. And then he was remembering a situation where everything got fucked up. He got into a fight with Bruce Lee on the set. He dented the woman's car, who was one of the producers, Zoe Bell.
Yeah.
After Kurt Russell gave him steer clear of her, and Yeah, and then he's remembering all that, and he's remembering, I fucked all that up, and then it's just this like grin on his face, like, yeah, he's right. I shouldn't have been on set. It's great.
Are there any title cards? Is the movie divided into parts? I know he loves to do that quite often.
None of that. None of that.
What's the what are the most Tarantino moments? Well, so here's another
There's
thing
a weird voiceover
that is
at
Kurt
the end
Russell,
of the
even
movie.
though he's an actor in the movie.
Yeah,
Right.
Kurt Russell playing a different character in the movie. Kurt Russell does a voiceover, even though he plays a different character in the movie.
I think that's great.
I know. I was listening to that. And I'm like, is he actually having Kurt Russell narrate this as Kurt Russell and not the character he just played?
Yeah.
Which was a lot of fun. There's no title cards. There isn't a lot of I don't know, what would you call, like, posturing? I don't know how else to put it. There aren't a lot of people showing you how smart they are or how much they know about pop culture. And Chris, I think you pointed this out to me. By setting this movie in 1969, you can just have the characters enjoying the pop culture, the same stuff that Tarantino does, so he doesn't have to explain it all to you.
Yeah. Right. People just sit down and watch people talk about shows like they're shows that are actually on. Like, we're going to go home and we'll watch FBI, and they don't have to explain, produced by so-and-so, and this person was the greatest stunt car driver ever. Like, people aren't walking encyclopedias. People are just consuming pop culture. And he can take his encyclopedic knowledge of all that and his love of Los Angeles, and he is a creature of Los Angeles. He's able to take that. He just paints the picture, and he has the characters inhabit it. And by that, it's clearly Tarantino's work, but it doesn't have the monologuing.
I saw it so recently, and it's so long, like all of his movies now, and there's so much to unpack. I think my favorite movie of his, aside from Reservoir Dogs, just because it's miraculously short and it has no filler, is probably Jackie Brown. Which is, it's a very Tarantino movie, but it's not a very Tarantino. I think he made it at the wrong time. If he'd made it 3 movies later, it probably would have been a really big hit. But because he made it right after Pulp Fiction, people are like, "What the fuck is this?" So I don't know where this falls into the canon, if you want to call his body of work that. But I really did find myself enjoying it, and I didn't really get bogged down by the running time until probably the 2-hour and 10-minute mark, when I was like, nothing has really happened except I know that this movie's like 30. There's 30 more minutes. What's going on? And then it goes on.
Yeah.
And the crazy ending happens that I was lukewarm on at first. But now I'm coming around to.
Yeah. Because what are the options? Is that you just do the Manson family murders again? Where does that leave you?
Yeah, and that would be, to your point, Chris, I think really exploitative. Like, just why would we need to see that? Movies have been made about it, books have been written about it. Not that I think Roman Polanski is any model of humanity, but I mean, he probably thinks about it every day. Why does he need to see that again? Of course, there's a lot of things that Roman Polanski should see, like, say, a prison cell, but that's another argument for another time.
I am really glad he had such a small part in this movie. Because, like, if he wasn't in the movie, it would be like, it would not be accurate, but not to say it's accurate exactly,
right?
Because it rewrites history.
Yeah, but the 2 things about it that I really, really, really liked. Well, all of Brad Pitt's stuff is great. When he gets to use his stuntman prowess, it's always really, really funny and really effective until the end, when it's kind of funny, but then you realize that this guy's a trained fighter and could probably kill anybody. And he does kill 2 people in the most... I've noticed now, I think, is this the second dog mauling death in a Tarantino movie? Because somebody gets mauled to death by a dog in Django, right?
Oh, yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. I guess so.
They make a big point of showing that Brad Pitt has this pit bull that he loves, who is very sweet, but who and is very well trained. But you kind of get the idea that there's more to their relationship, and there is, and it's that the dog is a trained killer also. So, I mean, not trained killer like it pulls out like a switchblade or anything like that, but it kills you like a dog would kill you.
Yeah, like in John Wick.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like he's a Halle Berry. Yeah, right.
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 But like his dog is so well trained. Like he just clicks and the dog knows exactly what to do. The dog waits for him to say, "Go ahead," before eating. Like he's put 2 whole cans of dog food in there, but the dog doesn't move.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the end, when, you can see that the dog is the first one who is like, hey, something weird is going on, because she looks out the window and Brad Pitt thinks she's like looking at dinner. He's high on LSD, by the way, which is not really all that important.
Acid-soaked cigarette. It heightens the scene for sure.
Yeah. Well, at first he's not sure if he's tripping or if the house is actually being broken into, and he says to one of the, people who break in, "Is this really happening?" And the guy says, "Yes, I am the devil, and the devil is going to kill you," or something like that.
I'm here to do the devil's work.
I'm here to do the devil's work. And
Brad Pitt misquotes later excellently.
Yeah. And the thing that's kind of funny about the way the fight starts is you think for a minute that maybe Brad Pitt is going to get shot in the face and killed, but he's holding a can of dog food, and he just whips it.
Heavy can, yeah.
Yeah, and he whips it in the pail. What
I think Sadie,
yeah. He whips it in her face, and she hits the ground, and the other two are like, "Holy shit!" And then Brad Pitt goes, and the dog just runs and attacks the guy who's holding him at gunpoint. And then it's just some of the most brutal, shocking violence, even for a Tarantino movie, that I've ever seen. Because the thing about like the Django violence is almost cartoony,
right,
in some places. Like there's so much blood and it's so absurd. And then by the time you get to the end of The Hateful Eight, there's just so much blood that you're kind of immune to it. Whereas this is the only violence in the movie.
That's right.
And it's like, maybe 6 minutes long, and it is soul crushingly realistic. So even though one of them gets torched with a flamethrower, and I have to say, like watching it, I was kind of like, this is a little icky, but at the same time, it was the Manson family, so who gives a shit?
Right. Well, also doing it that way makes it so that it's such a sharp turn from what we know actually happened.
Right.
That it's all, and he's tripping on acid, and these people are out to kill, and it's so big. Also, so Leonardo DiCaprio, eventually he went to Italy. He took Al Pacino's advice, and he made a lot of money. He's coming home. He's waiting for the next career move. That's why everybody's over at the house. That's why he smoked the acid cigarette. That's why Leonardo DiCaprio was wasted. That's
he's in the swimming pool reading a book or something.
Oh, he's listening to the radio really loud, and that's why he can't hear anything.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
Until she comes running out, and where her face is like covered in blood, and she's shooting a gun in the air. So it is.
Yeah, it's Sadie, I should mention.
It is almost. It has to be larger than life. I think it was a larger than life moment, and also it's less brutal than what actually happened. The impacts are tough, they're real. You feel them, but also like, what happened in real life. It's like an ultra dimension thing.
Yeah. But if I could watch any moment in the movie again, I would watch the whole ranch sequence again, just because it's kind of a perfect example of tension building. And because the thing that's funny about it is you think to yourself, Brad Pitt is in control of every scene he's in. He's in control of every situation, but you're still just like, there's so many of them. Mm-hmm. And you know so much about the Manson family that you think this just might be like one of those weird twists in a Tarantino movie, like when Marvin gets shot in the face in Pulp Fiction. It's just like, maybe they're just going to kill Brad Pitt halfway through, Mm-hmm. How the fuck do I know?
Okay. Anything else to say about Once Time?
Nah.
I gave it 3 stars on Letterboxd. I think I'm going to upgrade that. The 3.5 stars, I think I'm going to upgrade it to 4.
I currently have it at 3.
And I'm going to see it again basically as soon as I can. And I really want people to know, but I also don't know how to tell them that it doesn't end with the Manson murders. Maybe just...
Well, they'll figure it out when they see it.
I hope so. But also, people are going to ask, and also people are going to... Like, I say, oh, I loved it. And people say, don't they, like, do the Manson murders in that movie? And then what do you say? You say no.
Well,
that's what I like to say, but I'd also like
Yeah.
to not have the world come down on me. Hey, you spoiled one of the biggest twists of the year.
Yeah, I
do you
mean,
do?
unfortunately, this podcast is called Spoiler Piece Theater, but I guess you're talking about when you address people directly,
Yeah.
when they come up to you and say, Chris, you watch movies a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
could you like that movie? That movie's about Charles Manson. Fucking Jesus. Charles Manson shows up. You barely see his face.
Oh, yeah, he's in one scene, literally.
Well, if that's all we got there. So see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I intend to.
You know what happens now, but also you don't know everything happens. You also
No.
don't know how everything feels when it happens. Mm-hmm. It's like Dave said, the dialogue. He really goes for the dialogue in the recreated TV scenes, which I think is the better way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's writing 60s style Western dialogue where there are really just too many metaphors and too many tough guy-isms. But that's
Yeah.
fine because that's what it was. And the characters themselves don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So then also don't see Perfect Strangers. What is it?
Secret Obsession.
Secret
Secret
Obsession.
Obsession
Perfect Strangers. But don't watch that really bad 80s sitcom either.
with Bronson Pinchot.
If that name's up for grabs now, I mean that would work as a as a psycho stalker movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then if you're feeling nasty, you can check out our Patreon page, which we mentioned at the top of the show. Get our thoughts on Winter's Tale and why you should see it for fucking weird reasons that you probably are not expecting them to be the reasons we're telling you to. And then you can check out, we'll have a new poll at the beginning of this month. There will be exclusive audio every week. And thank you for those who are already donors, and look forward to having you on if you are not. But you can always find the podcast free everywhere in the same places everywhere podcasts are found.
Mm-hmm.
You can find us on Twitter at Spoilerpiece, on Facebook Spoilerpiece Theater. You can find us on Instagram too. We don't usually plug the Instagram.
At Spoiler Piece.
At
Yeah.
Spoilerpiece. Spoilerpiece@gmail.com is the email address, and you can give us a call
At 862-21-PEACE.
where you can leave a voicemail for us. My name is Chris Jensen. I'm a contributing writer at Seaville Weekly. I'm a member of BAFCA, and you can find me on Twitter at @Etstuperite, on Letterboxd as K Jensen. That's KJENSON.
My name is Evan Crean. I'm editor for The Independent. I am co-chair of BAFCA and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living. And you can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon.
And my name is Pat Sajak. I host Wheel of Fortune with Vanna White, and you can follow me wherever he is on Twitter. But also, I'm Dave Riedel, and I write for Salt Lake City Weekly and Orlando Weekly, and I'm on Twitter and Letterboxd as Dave Sees Movies.
We'll see you again next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.